Hi there, Saksham this side from ACE IPM, and people often have queries or concerns whether to go with management or whether to go with law. What are the differences between the two, and which one to go for? So, in order to get all your queries cleared, we have a special guest with us today. That is Mr. Sarthak Garg, someone who has been my ex-roommate over there at IIM Rohtak. In 2019, he appeared for the management entrances, had an All India rank 122 in IIM Indoors, IPMET as well, and he cleared IIM Rohtak, took an admission, thought he can push the limits further, dropped out of IIM Rohtak, then appeared for all the legal entrances in the year 2020, had an All India rank 102 in CLAT, All India rank 68 in IELTS, and an LSAT percentile of 98.2%. He also managed to clear DUJAT and was getting an admission in SSCBS. And he then went ahead and took admission in the prestigious NLU Delhi, wherein he is currently pursuing his BA LLB. So I welcome you to the channel, and I'd want you to introduce yourself to the audience and make us more aware of what you are up to and what your academic background has been like.
Thank you, Saksham. It's an honor and privilege to be working with you once more. I mean, it's been a long time since we met. So,
Certainly.
and I'd be happy to share my experience with the juniors. So, yeah, it's true what you said that I did drop out of management to pursue law, but it was not my motivation was not to pursue something greater. It's just that I was not happy in the field that was I was in, and I felt that law might be my calling.
All right, perfect. So what has your academic background been like?
So I pursued my 12th in commerce from a I come from a small town, so I have a very small town upbringing, and I was not exposed to all these things until my 12th standard. I believe it was in the January of 2019 when I first about the course of IPF. So that's really where I began to delve into these fields and came to know about all these different entrance exams.
That's great. And I believe you're a math student, right?
Yeah, I had maths in addition to commerce in my 12th.
Okay. So as you mentioned that in the month of January, that was when you were exposed to the field of IPM and maybe CLAT as well. So when was your actual preparation started, and how was your experience of preparing for these entrances like?
So personally, I talked to a senior back then, and that senior, I talked to the senior about LAT, and that particular senior sort of discouraged me about it. So I gave up on the plans to pursue any entrance exams because according to them, it was too late for me. But after my board exams, I was like, okay, I have a month right now. Why not do something at the very least? So that's when I began preparing. I joined the coaching, and I began preparing for IPMAT. But the coaching instructor was like, while you're preparing for IPMAT, might as well go for CLAT as well. Like it's not that additional of a burden. So I went ahead, prepared for it. Did not really perform well because well, I never focused on CLAT at the point. But yeah, that's why I ended up in IPM.
Okay, that's great. So if you can focus more on your entrance preparation part, if in case you have any special tips for each of the sections that come in the management entrances, which includes quants, logical reasoning, verbal, as well as GK in some of the entrances, if you can shed some light on, what are the resources that you use, and how you ensure that you're acing all these sections, and what are the books that you can recommend to your future aspirant, to the future aspirants.
So personally, I never really referred to any books per se. I just went with whatever the material that my coaching instructor was providing me with, because more or less it's similar. I mean, you don't really need to research so much into that. A little basic research, just ask somebody who's into that, who has done one of these degrees, and talk to them, and they'll suggest you any book. Just go with that. You don't really need to, put too much effort into deciding book for yourself. And when it comes to GK, a lot of people tend to focus very much on GK, but first, I never really gave it that much importance. All I did was I used to watch a few YouTube channels. I used to watch a few marathon videos where you had 7 to 8 hours of GK sessions right before the exam. Because well, most of the GK you find in these exams, that's generally in the last month or two preceding the exam. So it's like preparing for GK, especially like static GK might make sense, but preparing for GK like 1 year before the exam, that does not really make sense because most of the events that you will have to address in your exam, they will be from 1 to 2 months preceding the exam itself. When it comes to vocabulary, etc., I feel that I have been reading as like I got into the habit of reading as a child very soon. So when I started giving my entrance exams, I had almost read at least 100 books by then. And it might sound like a lot, but when you study these fields, you come across people who have read a lot more. But the point being that reading is, at the end of the day, reading is very important when it comes to these exams because remember that you are on a time crunch. Not only do you have to be accurate, you also have to be very time effective. So in order to improve your efficiency, you really need to get in the habit of reading. So if you are someone who is who, like, if you're in a 10th or 11th standard and you're thinking of preparing for exams, rather than focusing on their patterns, because that's bound to change in the coming years, focus on reading as much as you can. Be it newspapers, be it novels, fiction, non-fiction, doesn't matter. As long as it's a word, you as long as there's a paragraph with words in front of you, just go on reading it.
Okay, that's great. And any specific tips for the quants part and the logical reasoning part?
So, Saksham, when it comes to LR, personally, I refer to there's this website called the Khan Academy. You might be knowing about it. It's a pretty famous website. They have a course on 3-year LSAT. Now, I know that's not something you are aiming for. That's for people who have graduating and now thinking about pursuing a 3-year law. But their course material with respect to specifically reasoning, with respect to law entrance exams, and maybe it might help you with other exams as well. But that's very effective because those questions are extremely tough in nature and they have a detailed solution there. Now, once you get in the habit of solving such difficult questions, questions like the kind you'll face in CLAT, IPMAT, etc., these won't really be too tough for you. They'll feel like a cakewalk. So that's where I feel you should study LR for. When it comes to Q&A, I had maths in my 11th, 12th, but that does not really help too much. I mean, for instance, Saksham did not have maths in his 12th standard, yet he managed to clear both math, etc. And when it comes to law exams, well, the maths is very basic. Even if you have studied maths till 10th standard, that's more than enough to crack any law entrance exam.
All right, perfect. So that's okay. And also, as you mentioned, I am a non-math student. So anything special that a non-math student should be doing so as to compensate for that lack of math in their curriculum for the last 2 years?
Yeah. So when it comes to if I'm, like when it comes to CLAT, etc., you don't really need to compensate anything. You know enough maths already to effectively do these exams. But when it comes to IPMAT, I have given these exams like twice, and the second time I was completely out of touch with maths. It had been over a year and a half. The last time I studied maths was in college with Rukshakshan. So despite that, I managed to clear the exam. The reason being, I did not focus on the core maths exam. You do not need to trouble yourself with integration, etc. Like the hardcore maths. You just need to study the reasoning part of mathematics, which means when it comes to questions that are more similar to LR, etc., those are the kinds of questions you need to target. Because if you're able to crack only those, that should be enough to, at the very least, get you through the exam. Now, if you have the time and you're willing to put the effort, then definitely go ahead, study a little more, go into a bit more typical maths topics, etc. But primarily focus on your strengths, which are reasoning.
Okay, that's a great insight, and I'm sure it'll help a lot more aspirants. And we have already covered the concept building part as to how did you go about, doing the preparation. But can you throw like concept building is just one part of the equation, the other part is practice, and you need to ensure that you're doing good in that area too. So can you also throw some light on the mock test strategy or something of that sort, what a student should follow and how many mocks, you were giving at your time?
So during my first year of entrance exams, I did give a lot of mocks with respect to IPMAT because IPMAT in IPMAT you really need to up your time management because you only have 40 minutes for each section, and each section like you'll get lost in a question. You'll forget the track of time when all you can spend on a question is 2 minutes in the first section or 1 minute in the other sections. And the same goes for CLAT and ALET because ALET you have 90 minutes to answer 150 questions, and in CLAT also you have only 120 minutes to answer 150 questions, which are quite tough in nature. You'll spend a lot of time. So it will help you to understand when you need to skip a question because understand this: you are not aiming to get 100%. You need to barely get half probably marks. Like 50% marks are generally good enough to clear the cutoff. So it doesn't make sense for you to bash your head against the question. So mocks are very important in helping you know that okay, this question yeah, mocks are very helpful when it comes to skimming through the questions. That okay, you can look at a question now and you can simply by looking at it understand how much time it is going to take. If spending that much time is warranted and you have solved the other questions quickly enough that you have time saved up, go ahead and attempt it. If you don't have the time, then skip it. That's where mocks are essential. Some people tend to use mods as a learning method, but I don't recommend that because if you want to learn, do that additionally. Don't depend upon mocks for that because mocks are a last resort to learn if you are using it for the learning purpose. So I
Okay,
think that's
that's
my mocks.
That's great, and I totally agree to what you said. And they play a very important role in actually maximizing the score. As you mentioned, if you're trying to cover up your syllabus, that's not probably the best thing that you can do. But once you have at least covered some of your syllabus, you can then start upping your score by getting to know your strength areas, your weak areas, where you can save time and those things. And with that, I jump on to my next question. Okay, this was your strategy in the mocks, but after giving these number of mocks, you got to know, how to actually approach the exam. So how did you actually approach your actual IPMAT as well as the UJAT exams? If you can throw more light on that.
When it comes to math, the thing is you have sectional time limits. So you anyways get 40 minutes per section. You don't get, it's not like if you are managed to do one section quickly, the time gets transferred. So you need to relax a little in that specific exam because you're not saving time in that. The way I functioned was I used to look at all the questions one by one without attempting them. If it was very straightforward, then maybe I'd attempt it. But I just make a mental note that okay, this question is this level of difficulty, and might take me a little more time to solve, or this question can be attempted. Then I'd attempt only the questions which I was very confident about. Now, in the 2019 attempt, because I knew about mathematics at that point, having freshly graduated from school, I attempted a lot of mathematics based questions. But in 2020, I skipped them. I did not even bother reading them. The moment I saw a question on set or maybe something else that was core mathematics I had not studied, I straight up skipped it. I only attempted the reasoning questions which I knew were within my reach. Uh, when it comes to DUJAT, to be honest, provides a lot of time to you. Like you won't have a time crunch in DUJAT. So be very comfortable with that. And I've cleared DUJAT twice, like in terms of exam. So my advice for that is go with your gut, because sometimes a question might look like you cannot solve it, especially when it comes to GK, but you really know the answer in the back of your mind. I don't know how many questions I have attempted, which might seem like a tukka or just a blind guess to an outsider, but my gut instinct was telling me that this is the right answer, and it ended up being the right answer. I mean, I had 100% accuracy rate in the 2019 DU chart. So go ahead with your gut instinct.
All right, that's great. And as you were talking about DUJAT, so in DUJAT, past academics play a very important role, right? So even now, if I talk about IPMs, it's only IIM Indore that does not give a specific weightage to your 10th and 12th, but all the other four IIMs are giving weightage to their past academics. In Rohtak giving 40% weightage, and others are also giving 30% and 20%, 25%. So, what do you think is the significance of your class 10th and 12th results in getting a college, even if it's a merit based, even if it's not a merit based admission, but rather an entrance based? And even starting this year for DU as well, they're doing away with merit based admissions. They will be now shifting towards CU set, which is going to be again, it's going to be a mix of merit as well as entrance. So, what do you think merit plays a role in these entrances? If you can share, your experience of what happened in DUJAT.
Merit does play a very significant role in these exams, because had it not played, I would had merit not been important, I would be in Shades of Dev right now. The reason being that in 2019, I had maths as an additional subject. So long story short, I did not have enough marks in maths compared to my other best four subjects. And but what DUJAT expects is you consider maths as one of your best four subjects. So that brought my overall percentage down. That was the sole reason I was not able to get into DUJAT. So imagine that, just one single subject that is complete, that took away my chance at admission in Shahid Sukhdev in 2019. But don't despair that just because you have a bad percentage, maybe you scored in the 80s, that does not mean you are completely out of the race. In 2020, I managed to clear DOJAT with such a rank that even with that negative, like my board's marks affecting me negatively, I still managed to get into CTS. So yes, they do hold a tremendous value. Do not think, yeah, that if you are going for an entrance exam, you can completely ignore your boards, etc. But even if you don't get good marks, don't despair. You still have a shot at clearing these exams.
I'm sure that will be motivating for a lot of people. And I believe, or I second you about that. Boards are very much important. If you still have time and, your board exams are not yet over, that is something that you should be focusing on. But of course, if you've already given them, you've already gotten your percentage, there's nothing you can do about that. But what you can work on is your aptitude test marks, and that is where you need to maximize your score to compensate for what you have done in your 10th and 12th. And talking about, managing the academics, or, the regular academics with entrance preparation, how do you think one should go about managing boards with entrance prep? You did not necessarily do that because, as you said, you started your preparation after your boards. But if one were to start earlier, then what do you think is a sweet spot for starting your preparation? And, how do you manage both of them together while not hampering one and the other?
All right. The thing is, these exams are not JEE or NEET. These exams don't have that level of competition. So even if you are hardworking and you have the ability to do so, you can crack these exams in a preparation of only 1 month. And as I said, boards are a very important factor when it comes to exams like these. Now you might think that okay, I'm going to attempt law, like I want to attempt CLAT, and there's no merit component in that. It's completely entrance exam based. True, but when it comes to some other activities in the future, your grades will affect you. So I'd still say that if you are in school and if you do not have sufficient time to prepare for both the entrance exams and your boards, focus on your boards for the time being. You'll still have sufficient time, maybe approximately a month after your boards and between that entrance exam. That is more than enough time if you are diligent enough to cover up your entire syllabus. I mean, that's what I did, and it's definitely possible. Like, you don't need to be afraid of that.
Yeah, certainly. I've seen people getting through in just a month's preparation, me included. And I've also seen people who have been preparing for 2 years and still don't make it to these colleges. So it actually depends on a person to person basis. I or Sarthak here cannot decide how long should you be preparing for that. My advice is always, as and when you get to know about, IPM or any other entrance, you just start your preparation at that moment. It can be self preparation too. Just be in touch with that subject, do it maybe an hour each day and spend the rest of the time, on your board examinations, so that at least you develop the basics which you can then utilize after you are done with your boards, when you are doubling down on your efforts for these entrance exams. So, we have already covered how did you go about your preparation and all, and, everything is covered in that regards. And then you got into IPM at IIM Rohtak. So, what was your or before that, I'd say, like, why did you actually get into management in the first place? What was your motivation behind that?
So I was very confused as a school in my school days, and to be honest, I still am. Just this entire process of admissions, choosing careers, it's a very confusing phase. Even now, I don't know whether which field of law I should pursue, whether I want to get into litigation or do I want to move into corporate law. That's an ongoing process as you continue discovering yourself. What's important for you is, as a student, keep your options open. Now by options open, I don't mean go ahead and do everything at all. Like, you don't have to take up maths with you don't have to take up non-medical with biology, and in the hopes that J nahi hua to you'll do neat. No, don't do that. By keeping your options open, I mean is that perform so good in an exam that at the very least you have that as a backup option. For instance, in 2019, I had I had no intention of becoming a law student, but because I kept my option open, I simply attempted CLAT. I got a decent score at it, not something to brag about, but like a decent score at it. So I knew what CLAT entailed, and I knew that okay, I have the potential to crack it. Simply on that basis, I had the I could muster the courage to drop out of IIM Rohtak, because once you keep your options open, once you know about a certain field, once you are thinking with an open mind, that's when you are able to really explore that field. That's when, because this is a very open-ended process, right? As a 17, 18-year-old, you don't really know where your talents lie. You don't really know what you want from life. Do you want money, or do you want to maybe start an NGO and do some charity? You don't know anything at all. So the point is, keep your options open, because studying in one of these elite colleges, that will open a lot of doors for you. So at the very least, prepare for these exams, get a seat in them, and after you get the seat, then maybe you'll be able to figure out, do you want it or not. So
Yeah.
that's the approach I went with, and maybe that might be helpful for you as well.
So, thanks for, mentioning or, elaborating on the discovery process. How do you discover and you explore all the options? And the same happened with you, and you then chose to drop out of IIM Rohtak midway. So, why did you exactly drop, and was this drop worth it at the end?
The answer to the second part of the question is yes, but I'll come to that later.
Yeah.
Uh, the thing is that I was simply not satisfied, and it could be for a variety of reasons. And the thing is, not everybody is comfortable with every situation. For instance, as I said, I came from a very small town. I was absolutely unaware of what was really going on in the outside world. I'm pretty sure a lot of your viewers who are from small cities who haven't that level of exposure can relate to it. Like you can see me conversing with Saksham in English right now, but back then I could not do it. I had absolutely no potential for that, and I was a complete misfit in my own terms. So I was not comfortable to say, and I was not satisfied with what I had at that point, because see, Rohtak is a very new college, and you don't really know what's going to entail in the future. So there's a degree of uncertainty there, and that's why I did not really want that degree of uncertainty. I was like, if I have the potential to do something, might as well, exploit that potential. I know that I can crack an entrance exam once more. So I was like, okay, I'll just have confidence in myself. I'll drop out and I'll go for something else. Whether or not to pursue law, that was really not finalized at the time I dropped out. I talked to a few friends of mine, a few seniors of mine, and they were like, okay, at the very least decide something, because at that time I was confused whether I should pursue law, whether I should go for IIM Indore, DUJAD, or whether I should do CA. So I talked to a lot of people, and they were like, at the very least choose one field. Now when it comes to law, I had a little bit of exposure. My father is somewhat in the field of law, and he's not a lawyer but somewhat. So I had a little exposure to this field, and I thought that I'd enjoy it, and I ended up giving the law entrance exams.
Perfect. As you mentioned about the uncertainty of being a part of the first batch of an institution, starting this year, we have three more IIMs that have come up with IPM. That includes IIM Ranchi, Bodh Gaya, and Jammu. So, what do you think, or like what your message would be to the aspirants? What they should be expecting from these colleges, and whether is it worth it to actually be applying for these?
Okay, so disclaimer, I haven't really looked into all these programs in much detail, so I'm not the best authority on this. But the thing is, being the first batch of a program is going to be incredibly tough. Now many people like to think that, okay, we are the pioneers of a program and it's going to be fun, but the issue is, while the future batches of the college might look up to you as the first batch, but the next 5 years are going to be incredibly tough. So if you really have that determination in you, that even in circumstances like that where you have no idea how, when, and like what sort of placements are you going to get, and even if you're going to get them, uh, then yeah, go ahead. But there's still too much uncertainty about these programs, especially since not just these programs, but these three IIMs, I believe they are baby IIMs, right? All these three of
IIM
them.
Ranchi is not. IIM Ranchi is the newer IIM, and the other two are baby IIMs.
Yeah. So, like, branches are new IIM, two, the other two are baby IIMs. So it's not like only the program is new; the institute in itself is also new. So while it might have the IIM tag, it still has to prove itself as an institute worthy of that tag, and that's why I'd still suggest, like, as someone who dropped out of an IPM program, it would be very hypocritical of me to tell somebody to join that same program. So I'd still say, maybe take your time. In the future, these programs do have the potential of becoming incredibly great, especially since most times are gradually transitioning towards IPM. But for the time being, these may or may not be worth it.
All right, perfect. And also, yeah, being the first batch, we have our own sets of challenges, and we do not have someone to look up to because there's a big gap between IPM and MBS, so you do not interact that much with those people. So you're all by yourselves. You have to manage things, and you're exposed to a new environment, and you have to adapt yourself to it. So I'm sure it is challenging, but of course, IPM as an option, I feel like is something which in future will get to a point wherein more people are aware of it, more people are interested in that. It's going to get a lot more competitive, better, newer, more IIMs joining this up. This party, we already have like five IIMs as of now, but I expect more to come up in the near future. So I feel like the program in itself will be worth it at the end, but you have to be willing to take risk if in case you're joining the newer IIMs, or because of course, as you said, it takes some time for a program to get stabilized. But it's not that it it can also not be an absolute answer. It has to be relative. Okay, these are the colleges that you have gotten into, but what are the other options do you have? If in case you feel like there's an option which, in terms of ranking or placement, or the exposure that you get isn't so great as an IIM, but at least it has a track record backing it. So in that case, maybe I would have been like, my opinion would have been skewed to those colleges because they have a proven track record. But if of course, if in case you feel like, even despite of all this uh, uncertainty, you still are getting something like the best that you can get for yourself, then of course go for it, provided that your finances also allow, because IPM in itself is a pretty expensive course. So with that being said, so you took a full drop, so you placed all your bets on the entrance examinations of 2020.